Welcome once again, everybody, to the Quantum View of Spirituality lecture series. This is the second of 3 in that series. And we are here today with the founder of the Diamond Approach, Hamid Ali, who writes under the pen name Almaas. And with that, it's my absolute joy and honor to turn things over to Mr. Hamid Ali, who will be guiding us through the rest of this session.
Thank you, Amelia, for the nice introduction. Taking us around the world with everybody is. This is a continuation of discussion or presentation, Quantum View of Spirituality. We did the first lecture 3 weeks ago. There's a second, there'll be a third one. And basically, I'm presenting a view of spirituality, of spiritual experience and spiritual awakening and realization. And I'm using the quantum theory and the principles and finding of quantum theory to help us understand the spiritual experience, different kinds of spiritual experience. And I'm presenting a certain perspective of spiritual experience. So the two principles from quantum theory that I used last time were two of them. What's called the question of measurement and the principle of superposition. The principle of superposition, I just go through them fast because I'm going to use them for this lecture too, is that for any situation, for anything you want to find out, for any experimental setup, you don't really know, according to quantum theory, what will you find out until you make the measurement, until you ask the question, set up your devices and make a measurement. And making the measurement is like getting a result, which corresponds to a spiritual experience, to having an experience, an awareness that results in a particular experience. But that is the question of measurement, superposition. That in quantum theory, there are many possibilities of what one can find, and you don't know them till you make the measurement, till you ask that question and do the experiment and make the measurement, you get the result. But all possibilities exist. In fact, there are infinite possibilities. And those are called in superposition. They're all together somehow. And that's usually called the cloud. The cloud of probability, the probability wave. And each one of the answer or possibilities has a certain probability. However, only when you measure it, you get the result. So things are superposition until they are measured. Or everything is like in a cloud, and the cloud collapses. It's called the collapse of the cloud probability. Then you get a particular result. So I'm using that as a metaphor to say in our spirituality, it depends on the experience, but also depends on what practices we do, which view of reality we have, what kind of question we ask, what kind of practice we do, and that will give us different results. That's the idea, different results, which means different spiritual experiences when it comes to awakening realization, different kinds. So it is my way of presenting different kinds of different types of realization, awakening or spiritual illumination, and how to make sense of the variety of them. First, to show that there is a variety. There's not only one answer. There are, in fact, infinite possible answers. That shows what I call the potentiality, infinite potentiality for spiritual nature. The infinite potentiality corresponds to quantum theory to the superposition of the wave function. I had presented last time, I began by presenting the dualistic view of spirituality and realization and the non-dual view. So I'm going to go over some of those to present specific features that I didn't mention earlier to emphasize them before I go on to another kind of realization utilizing different quantum views. One of the ideas of quantum theory I'm going to present today, discuss, is the information theory. Quantum information theory. Next lecture, I'll be talking about the entanglement and how it's related to spiritual realization. So I talked about last time that you can have realization in the ordinary world, what many spiritual teaching call the dualistic, the ordinary world, or the world of lies, or samsara. You can be in that world and have a spiritual experience. In fact, most people's spiritual experiences happen while they perceive the world as the world of objects, discrete things, and then it's not a state of unity or consciousness. It's just ordinary physical world with people and things, and you can have spiritual experience all the way to spiritual realization where you are the true nature. You are the spiritual. You are the light. You are the fullness of presence, and that's what I called at that time, last time, the dual kind of realization, to be timelessness, fullness of presence, and witnessing everything. But what I'm witness are the ordinary world. I am still the ordinary world, although I am myself not part of this ordinary world. I am a fullness of presence, pure light, pure love, pure awareness. But not the pure awareness, and I'm not infinite, I'm localized, I'm individual. However, the way I put it last time, it's like being a point of light, like a radiant star of presence. When I think about what is the system we're discussing here, because in the quantum theory, you have to have a system or situation, interaction, certain particles, certain thing you're studying, and that's called a system. And has its wave function. I was wondering, what's the wave function that applies here to reality as a whole? In fact, in quantum theory, some people propose the wave function of the universe, of the whole universe. In fact, was proposed by Stephen Hawking and James Hartle in 1983. In case you're wondering what wave function we're using. So the issue with realization in the dualistic world is not that it's real, and the dualistic world is actually how things appear. It is one of the solutions, like one of the terms superposition. You make an experiment, which means you do a practice, you get ask a question like, what is the meaning of life? Who am I? And you become this pure presence and light. And however, we are still in the ordinary world. And the delusion is not that what many teaching think, that the ordinary world is a delusion. The delusion is believing the ordinary world is the only way reality can be. We will see in any realization, if we take it as the only way, that can become a delusion. So I'm going to go now, so I just made clear that the being presence or being true nature, its freedom and blissfulness and light, is experienced in the midst of the ordinary world of most people, that most people know and that science studies. And that world appears as what is really appearing. That is one solution. You know, you say that's one quantum solution for our spirituality. Here, what is the one way reality can appear as the ordinary world. Now I'm going to move on to the other thing. I discussed also non-dual realization as another kind. You have certain view of reality, like part of the view of reality is that all reality has one nature. And what is the ultimate nature of reality? And when you ask that kind of question, you get certain answers, depending also on how you ask a question, who asks it, and what is the view overall of the teaching you take, and what are the practices. So non-dual is meaning the experience and the experience are one, are the same thing. However, that's the case in dualistic realization, I and presence are the same. However, here also everything also not separate from each other. So the world changes. The way we perceive the world from non-dual appears different and doesn't appear as the world of discrete objects, but as one unified fabric. Everything, all objects are manifestations or formulation of the same formless or infinite kind of ground, whether it's consciousness or awareness or love. And I'm coming here to to show that even in non-dual realization, there are many kinds. There's not only one way of experiencing non-dual consciousness or non-dual truth. Or non-duality can appear in different ways. Not in the sense of lack of separation is true in all non-dual ways of experiencing. However, what is the ground of the non-dual? What is the constituency? What is the nature? What is the medium? What is the expanse that unifies everything? That changes depending on tradition and teaching. For instance, in Advaita Vedanta, one of the main non-dual teaching in India, the ground is called Satchitananda. And Satchitananda is composed of three syllables, Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means truth or being, existence. Chit means consciousness. Ananda means bliss or good feeling or joyfulness. So it is a combination of a happy medium that is conscious and a consciousness of its own beingness. It is and from that place, it is the beingness of not just of what I am, the beingness of everybody and everything. So everything is unified at this ground of being, conscious beingness with a good, blissful feeling. If we go to the Buddhist kind of non-duality, we see it's a different way they experience. They don't talk about beingness. There's no mention of beingness in the ground. In the ground, they call it empty awareness. So because in Buddhism, emptiness is important. And basically it is a sense of clarity, of an expanse, of a clear, empty awareness. And what characterizes that clarity is a sense of emptiness. The emptiness feels like non-being, like the absence of beingness. In fact, Um, that is important in Buddhist teaching, which is that reality characterized that it does not have inherent existence. Nothing has inherent existence. Here too, even the awareness does not have inherent existence. But all it means it's really that it is a paradoxical way. How can something appear and not exist? They say it doesn't have inherent existence. It doesn't have a sense of existence being, but appears as a luminosity, which is very different from the Advaita view, which is beingness, sat. Of course, for the Sufis, the fundamental truth ground is love. For the Kabbalah, is Ein Sof, which literally means no end. So I'm just saying there are different ways of experiencing the non-dual and ground, and they are all, you could say, in superposition. That meaning spiritual nature has all those on potential. What we experience depending on us and the view we take, the teaching we follow, and the question we ask and the practices we do. So what I'm showing here, that the superposition, which is the potentiality of spiritual nature, can appear in many kind of non-dual realization. They're all non-dual, however, their ground is different. I want to go into some detail in one of these non-dual realization by using another principle from quantum theory. Here, the principle of quantum theory that I'm introducing is called the information theory. This was developed at the end of the 20th century by one of the major physicists at the time, John Wheeler, and who proposed the idea that information is more important, more fundamental than physical objects like particles. I give you a quote here about it. It says, his phrase, it from bit. Bit is computer language, is information. So it is an object or a particle. But the idea that the particles are not as fundamental as the information. It's difficult to understand what that means, and I'm going to try to sort of explain it some. So he proposes that physical reality, the it, is fundamentally derived from information, the bit. He argues that all physical particles, all physical entities, particle forces in space-time, originate from binary yes or no question answers through the observer participancy. This suggests the universe is a self-synthesized participatory system. Of course, that's how he began the idea of information theory. Information theory and quantum theory developed later. Now it is developed to the extent of being used for quantum computing, the development of quantum computers. However, some physicists had disagreed with Wheeler's perspective that the it arises from a bit, which means information is fundamental and particles are secondary, really arise from the information. Suggests they disagreed with Wheeler's perspective, believing that information requires a physical ground. Which, when you think about, of course, how else can it be? How can there be information? Where did the information come from? I don't really know his mathematical formulation, so I can't go in more detail about that. But I'm taking the idea that information is fundamental, you know, and from it arises the forces and the particles of physics. And now, the view, if you go and study information theory now, you probably get about computer language, which is not what I'm using. I'm using Wheeler's original formulation of information theory. However, the critics of Wheeler thought that there need to be a ground of physical, something there for information to come from. And when I bring it to the spiritual experience, which we can see from certain kinds of non-dual experiencing. I mean, there are ways of experiencing non-duality, non-dual realization, where the whole world appears like information. That's the basic idea, but I will try to illustrate how that can be, because that will be unsettling for many of us, I'm sure. We're all information. First, I will say, moving to the spiritual way of looking at things, I use the quantum view of information theory to help us understand something in a spiritual realization. And here, a non-dual realization, where the ground that many thought that Wheeler needs can be seen from a spiritual experience, that the ground will be the spiritual reality itself. Consciousness or being pure awareness, as Buddhists like Dzogchen or Mahamudra propose. So in other words, the idea that information is fundamental is similar to the non-dual view that all of reality, including the physical, are expression of the non-dual ground, the infinite expanse of consciousness, awareness, or presence. All of reality can be experienced from this infinite ground as appearance. That's what the Buddhists look at in Dzogchen. Everything appears as appearance, as the luminous shapes and colors on the surface of the spiritual ground. The experience is more like is of seeing that all of the universe as a luminous tapestry that includes all content of experience, whether physical or mental. The universe appears as a luminous surface that includes all shapes, forms, and patterns. And more, I won't go further to why is that information? I mean, the world from the non-dual perspective is from the Vedanta view, where everything is a pure consciousness and beingness, is that the whole universe is really illusory, is not real, is an illusion. And the Buddhists say illusion-like the way it looks, meaning it's sort of ephemeral and transparent. It doesn't have the solidity, the opaqueness that we usually see it in the ordinary world. Meaning, situating oneself in the non-dual ground and we look around, we witness reality. Reality doesn't appear as a solid, opaque objects that are separate from each other. And not only just not separate, they're all manifestation of the same ground. But since the ground itself is pure consciousness, pure awareness, especially when we see it as a pure empty awareness, then everything appears as transparent, luminous forms of light. One way of experiencing things from one particular view of non-duality, which I usually refer to as the absolute dimension, which is many non-dual teaching talk about the absolute, which is experiencing the ground as a vastness, an empty vastness, vastness that has nothing, no substance. It's completely light, transparent, like space, but empty in that space. And that all of reality appears as a glimmering of this vastness. But this glimmering appears as pure knowingness, as pure knowledge. So perceiving the object and include knowing them, but the knowing is itself the illumination. And the knowing can be seen is made out of concept because if you know there's a chair, although the chair doesn't seem exist, there's a tree, but the tree is transparent and doesn't have inherent existence, but it appears as the tree I see. However, it's transparent and made out of light. And so it's made out, in other words, made out of knowledge, pure knowledge, because in non-dual realization, you're not only aware of what you are or what reality is, but you also know it. You know you are awareness. You know you are being or consciousness. And you know that the tree is a tree, the wall is a wall. However, this knowing is not a mental knowing. It's a part. It's part of it is manifesting. In fact, you might not have a word for it. You just see it, and you know how to operate in relation to it. So you could say that this appearance of the world, which is pure knowing of the world through witnessing and immediate knowingness, is like information, because knowledge is information. So the knowingness in this non-dual kind of realization, where everything appears as a transparent light of pure knowledge, is similar to the quantum view information that everything is information. So this is sort of the parallel I am making between the information theory in science and how we see pure knowingness in the non-dual. So there's a sense of, in this non-dual, an infinite, vast expanse where I don't have even substance, but an emptiness, a lightness and freedom. And I am the whole universe, and the universe is nothing but my knowledge, my knowing of it. That knowing can be seen similar to the information that Wheelers talk about in terms of the physical world. So there is a ground, as some people said, Wheeler needs a ground. Here, the ground is the spiritual expanse. And the information emerges out of that ground, which is the entirety of the whole universe, including all of you, including the body that is mine, including the desk I'm sitting at, including the computer in front of me. It's all really knowingness and consciousness of this expanse of reality. It is one way of experiencing non-dual realization. Well, the whole world is one thing, but it is a tapestry. So it's true that nothing is separate from nothing, everything else, but I know what they are. There's a knowingness of what they are because I know how to operate or to function in relation to it. I look at my computer screen because I know it's a computer screen. However, there might be memories about it that tell me it's a computer, but at the present time, it's a pure perception. And the pure perception is glimmering with the light of knowing. So knowing here is seen as not as mental, but an inherent to awareness or consciousness. In fact, all the non-dual teaching include knowing in there because you don't just know, you're not just love, you know you are love, if you are a Sufi, for instance. If you're Advaita Vedanta, you don't just experience yourself as an infinite consciousness and beingness, you know you are that. When you say you know you are that, I don't mean you are the individual, you know that. No, you recognize yourself. You are the expanse. The individual is subsumed in that expanse. So this is a way of using information theory and taking it to the spiritual way of experiencing things, which is a parallel, making a parallel between spiritual experiencing and the quantum view. The principle of quantum view I'm using here, information theory. And one of the ways that reality can appear as this way is the vastness of empty awareness, light, where the whole universe is its knowledge. Some people call it, the universe is the mind of God. I'm not saying I'm God, but some people will think of this expanse as God or the divine. So in this perspective of the quantum view of spirituality, I'm basically using the quantum principles to help us understand the varieties of spiritual realization. So from the last lecture and this lecture, we see there are many ways of experiencing spirituality or spiritual realization. As I said last time, I'm not saying that spirituality is quantum. In the quantum theory, I'm using it as a lens to help us by using it as a metaphor and help us understand why there is a plurality of realization. There is not one kind of realization. This is the main reason why I'm doing this lecture is to show there are many kinds of realization that each teaching tradition usually emphasizes a certain kind of realization and says that is the reality. And in fact, the mistake that I think many make is by saying that's the only way reality can be. That means this teaching is correct, the other teaching not so. not exact. And I'm saying, no, from this quantum view of spirituality, each teaching is one way reality can appear. It is accurate, it is valid, it is a realization, it is a liberation. However, it is not the same as the other and doesn't have to be reconciled with the other. This corresponds to the quantum principle of superposition. There are many solutions to the experiment or answer to the question. Each one is valid, is what we find. So to illustrate further this principle of superposition and how it depends on the individual, how it depends on experience, because in quantum theory, the observer is important. Without the observer, there is no answer, no solution. The observer or the experimenter or questioner has become important in the quantum theory. They're still dealing with it. What does that mean? Is that needed or not? And it's a controversial question. What's called a measurement question is still not completely settled. But basically, the main way of looking at it is the individual or the experimenter or the one who makes the experiment, one who asks a question is important, is necessary for there to be a result, for there to be a measurement, for there to be a solution, which is in a spiritual language, in that the spiritual is an experience, and it depends on the individual, and depends on the teaching, depends on the view, what question we ask, what practice we do. So I will illustrate by this principle in quantum theory called superposition. I'm calling it here in the spiritual perspective, that spiritual reality has infinite potential. It has many ways of presenting itself, which means it's presenting the whole world. How we experience the world, how we experience reality, how we experience the whole universe, how we experience ourselves. So I'll give you another one, which is neither dual nor non-dual. Because some of you might think, well, we have to think they're dual, separate and not separate. No, there are other ways, actually. And that is part of the reason why I'm doing these lectures. So I'll give you how this happened to me, this new kind. One day I was on the beach, sitting on a log and looking at the ocean. I was in front of the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly things changed in a radical way while leaving all particulate there. I mean, things changed, but the particulate stayed there. Without the emergence of anything we usually call spiritual, which is so unexpected for me, because usually something will emerge like awareness or consciousness or emptiness or presence or love or in many ways reality can appear, but this time nothing emerged. It's just the appearance, of things, how things are experienced, change in a fundamental way. And the way I began by I was looking at the ocean, just sitting there on the log, looking at the ocean, enjoying. Suddenly, the ocean became more fully itself. It appeared as a powerful and amazing universe in its own. Its sense of being an ocean became so clear and dominant, so powerful that the ocean revealed its oceanness, its immense, alive, and unique. And my initial awakening, that kind of awakening, which was surprising, I wasn't expecting it, I didn't know there was such a thing. My initial awakening in this way of a spiritual realization, it was just the ocean. This ocean, not oceans in general. I wasn't thinking of ocean, it was just the ocean appearing, this particular ocean, as it is in this moment. No history of the ocean, no comparison with other ocean. The ocean in this ocean, unique and majestic. The interesting thing is this realization, which is different from all other realization I've had before, is the ocean did not appear as a spiritual nature I'm familiar with. It did not have the nature of consciousness, awareness, presence, or love, or anything like that, or mystery. No, it was just the ocean with its water and waves, full of life and forms, full of life forms. There was no ground of consciousness, not even a sense of awareness. Actually, in that experience, consciousness, awareness, presence, love, and so on seemed like alien concepts that did not apply to these realizations. They were not just not operative concepts. Many of us, some of us might know this realization. Most people don't know about it much. Because most of these days people talk about dual and non-dual. And I'm taking outside of that whole view of looking at things, dual and non-dual, to something that is neither dual nor non-dual. It cannot even be called spiritual, but it is actually true spiritual realization. It is not a spiritual in the usual sense of spiritual, in the sense that there is a spirit, there is awareness, there is consciousness, there is mystery. None of that. In fact, it is, the ocean did not look spiritual to me and didn't look physical. I couldn't be, they were not possible to describe it in these terms. In other words, the category of physical contrasted to spiritual disappeared. Like it appears as a conceptual dichotomy. There's the physical antithetical to the spiritual and the physical. Here, these are concepts that didn't apply to this realization. And there was no need to think of the ocean as physical. There was no need, it was just the ocean as ocean. And you could say, well, but the ocean made of water, that's physical. It is true, there is awareness of water. However, there was no need to think of it as physical. Because physical is contrasted to non-physical. It's not mental, not spiritual, not physical. It is what it is. Also, there's the awareness of the body. But the body is simply the body being the body, just like the ocean being simply the ocean. The ocean is this unique ocean and the body being this unique body. Each is itself. But there is no self connected to the body and no inner nature connected to the ocean. Because many spiritual realization, you see the ocean, you might see its nature, which is consciousness or awareness or love or made out of atom. No, it was just the ocean as it appears in ordinary sense. However, it's appearing so free from all the concepts we have about reality, so that the ocean is showing its oceanness. Looking around, there are the trees. Each tree being itself, not compared to other trees, not named as any kind of tree, but unique the way it is being itself. Being itself did not have the sense of someone or some awareness aware of the tree. No, actually, the other thing that's interesting in this kind of realization, there's no sense of witnessing. There's nobody witnessing. No sense of witnessing. There's simply the tree being the tree. The idea of perception is not present and not needed. Usually, most people think, how can that be? I mean, there must be, you're aware of the ocean, of the trees. Yeah, ordinarily. But in this realization, the idea of perception is not there. Actually, For it to be there, it has to be a memory. You have to remember that there is such a thing as perception. You see, you have to leave your ordinary mind to get into this realm of reality. The ordinary mind is full of notion, full of concept, like perception, like awareness, like witnessing. And the sand was being the sand with its own unique characteristic, and without a mind that described it as silicon or compared it to other elements of earth. And each rock and hill appeared as itself, revealing itself fully by being its own uniqueness. The question of whether all these were separate or not, significant in dual and non-dual teaching, did not arise here. It does not arise in this realization. The question of separate or not separate is irrelevant. Either separate, they're neither separate nor not separate. The particular were each itself, without it being seen as separate or not separate, dual or non-dual. Dual and non-dual are simply two sides, again, of a conceptual dichotomy that was not operative in this realization. Again, it is not, I'm not saying the realization is non-conceptual, because I'm saying it's beyond those concepts. I'm not saying it's non-conceptual. For that is simply the opposite of conceptual. Non-conceptual is again the opposite of conceptual, both being two opposing sides of a conceptual dichotomy that is not operative in this realization. So this realization cannot be seen as conceptual or non-conceptual without rejecting either one of them. Those can emerge. I mean, in fact, they can be thought, concept, but they're not forming the experience, the realization. Or again, there's awareness, there is the totality of all, the whole thing, instead of just the ocean, all of it. The whole universe is expressing itself. So realization can be of all or of each particular, for each is itself pure and simple. There is a freedom from self. In fact, the freedom of self is so total that there's no thinking of self or no self. Is it just that each thing is itself, showing itself in its fullness and uniqueness. There's immensity, purity, and simplicity. So there's no sense there's me aware of these things. There's no me is gone. There's just the ocean being the ocean. You can't say there's somebody aware of the ocean. That is a different kind of experience. In this kind of realization, there's the ocean appearing as ocean. Because the sense of self is gone here. It's already gone in other realization, but here gone in a different way. Here I'm describing my initial awakening some years ago of this kind that I ended up calling non-conditioned, because each realization reveals a condition of spiritual nature. Here is not a condition of spiritual nature. That's why I call it non-conditioned, because spiritual nature doesn't appear as spiritual here. The question of nature of is not relevant in this realization. Zen has something similar to it. Zen is the teaching I'm aware of that comes, maybe they're talking about the same thing when they refer to the suchness of things. Because Zen use the word non-dual, but they don't usually mean what I've been referring to as non-dual or the non-duality of Dzogchen or Veda Vedanta. I'll give you a quote by Dogen, one of the great Zen masters in Japan, because it refers to what he talks about thusness. Thus is that. So what I'm talking about, seeing things appearing as what they are, is similar to what Zen calls the thusness of things. Everything is what it is. The tree is a tree, the ocean is the ocean, the body is a body. And that's it. So here's the quote. Thusness of. Thus is the moon in water, is the moon in water. It is water thusness, moon thusness, thusness within thusness. Thus does not mean like something. Thus means as it is. Which is what I'm saying. Each thing is just what it is, as it is. This continued as a realization for some time and still continues by appearing sometime, but since, or at least for me, in this teaching, I had many kind of realization. They circulate, sometimes non-conditional, sometimes non-dual, sometimes dual realization, sometimes other kind of realization that I will discuss next time when I bring in the idea, of entanglement. But all these point to the spiritual infinity of potential, parallel to quantum superposition. Quantum superposition means there are infinite ways that one can find the answer to the question, depending on the question, that a reality can be in many ways. It is because of this, knowing many of those realizations, that I recognize the truth of each of the teachings I studied as true and real without having to choose one as the only real or ultimate. Different teaching emphasize different realizations because of the different questions or different approaches or individual differences between people. I add information theory in this lecture to use one more of a quantum principle to show why I talk of a quantum view of spirituality. I use so far the measurement question, quantum superposition, and quantum information theory. Next time we'll use other things, as I mentioned, entanglement. So I'm basically presenting different way today. I went over the dualistic view of realization, spirituality, to show that the ordinary world is one where reality can appear. And then I said, the non-dual reality, everything is unity, is oneness, is also another way reality can be. But I also went on to say there are many ways that we can experience this oneness because the ground of this oneness can be different, can be being or existence, as Vedanta, can be empty awareness as Buddhism, can be love as in Sufism, but it can be other ways. And I brought in one of them to show something equivalent to the information theory, that everything, the whole universe, appears as the knowingness inherent in the universe, and that one under those non-dual realization. So this view can allow all genuine teaching. It can create a mutual recognition between them without having to negate or affirm one as the only truth. We don't need to be sectarian about our spiritual realization or our tradition. Tradition can coexist, each as real, without having to reconcile. That's the interesting thing I have found, that although I've learned about studies, many teaching, learned their realization, and then I have my own experience of these different realization and other realization I didn't study, and there are many in this teaching. But I noticed is that some of them, they don't seem to relate to each other. But I don't feel there's no need in the mind to reconcile them. But each one is real on its own. And the mind that needs to reconcile them It doesn't work. Those isn't there. It's not needed. I can think of many of them, but in the experience of each one of them, it is what is happening. Like in the non-condition, everything is what it is. That's all. In the vastness of empty awareness, everything is the glimmering of this expanse, empty expanse of mystery. There are other ways non-dual realization can be. Any other realizations have nothing to do between dual and non-dual. And I gave you an example today about what I call non-condition. I'll give you other example in the next lecture. But now I think might be time for us to start our questions. But I want to take a minute, and then we'll come back in 2 minutes for our questions.
Hamid, Ali,
Hey.
first, my gratitude. Your book for me is like a spring of life water, that I can say. I have several questions, put it short. First, I understand the issue of, let's say, technique, practice, the question we apply. But usually, well, the realization is something, not what we do, it happens as far as I understand. So it unfolds. I understand how, let's say, yes, I'm doing several stuff, many stuff and so on, but it's not that in a way I am choosing what to do. I just follow the process. The river goes to the ocean. So in this case, does it mean that different people just drawn to different types of realization? So this first question. Second, about the integration, I've been drawn through many traditions. Each of them has a value, but there is the issue. Some say, okay, go one path or another path or third path. There are many of them. And what would be your advice about the integration issue? And third question, what happens in the middle? So one realization after another, do you come back to, let's say, regular self, or, okay, if you can comment. Thank you.
Well, maybe you could start with one question. I can't answer all of them at the same time. First thing.
Well, I think the integration, because.
Yeah, the first thing you said, that thing just happened. It's true. You know, especially realization or spiritual experience in general. You can't really do a practice and think this is going to happen. It happens when it happens. It's like spiritual nature has its own mind. And you could do practice forever and nothing happens. That answers the first thing you mentioned. So I'm agreeing with you. So what's the second question?
So in a way, we cannot set up an experiment. It just happens, right?
No, you set up an experiment. You do practice.
Unless in physics we can set up an experiment. We can choose.
The experiment here is a practice. You do a practice. Most teaching have their own practices. The experiment is the practice. So, but the practice doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question, your advice about the integration. So, Buddhist awareness, Sufi love, Taoist about all the energy work and so on. All have its value and adds up. Any advice about the integration?
What do you mean by integration?
Or combination?
You mean integrating them together?
I mean, choose, let's say, to choose one tradition, for example. Let's say, go this way. Okay, all of them have their own value. Choose the one and follow it completely. Or practice maybe different practices from different traditions as my heart moves me.
Usually people gravitate to a particular teaching or tradition, and it's good for them to practice it. I'm not inviting people to experience all those realizations. I'm saying having one realization is good, is enough by itself. I'm just saying when you have a realization, just don't take the view you're right and the other realization are not correct. That's the message. The message is not that you should have many realizations, but whatever realization you have, don't take it to mean you know the truth. The others one who following different tradition don't have the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about code.
And well, the last question was what happens?
Respect for the others. Yeah.
I feel it.
Yeah.
Can we say they're in a way equal and different in the same way?
They're all valid. They're all valid in some sense, whether I'm experiencing myself as pure awareness or consciousness, or I am just everything as it is. Each one of them has its own freedom, its own blissfulness. So there's no grading about which one is more accurate or better, or who's going to grade them? Reality doesn't grade. Human beings grade.
I see.
Hello, Hamid.
Hey, Alessandro.
Hi. My question is about, I'm wondering how, so I'm curious about how can I not be deceived in my experience? And what I'm hearing in this lecture and the previous one is that different individuals might have different proclivities for different kinds of experience. And it's not usual that they are able or open to all different types of experience. And it seems like there is scope to be misled or deceived, even the fact that it's possible for a whole tradition to believe that their perspective is the only perspective possible. For it to be possible to think that and be convinced by that, it means that experience can be misleading, to me, it seems. And I'm wondering, because I've heard you speak also, I remember you spoke about this thing called the al-mithal some time ago, that kind of like inter-dream realm where it's not really clear exactly if something is completely real or not. And so I'm wondering, could you be wrong yourself? Like, could this view also be incorrect? And how do you contend with the risk of being deceived? And how do you safeguard against it? Or like, what is the safeguard against being deceived? And like, how do you come to some kind of certainty if that's even possible? Because it sounds like everything's the case and nothing's the case, really. Reality is all these things and none of them at the same time. So I'm wondering, what is the straight and narrow path through that, if there even is one?
Okay, I'll answer you, Alessandro. Thanks for the question. First of all, in each realization, there is certainty, its own certainty. Anybody who really has a true realization, they're certain it is a true. Each tradition talks about certainty in the realization. And of course, there are the teachers who will help confirm it and all of that. But one need to have their own personal certainty in it. This is the truth, because it's your own experience, and you have to. A true realization has its own certainty, and the only issue I am bringing up for other people is not like that certainty is true. The problem that many fall into is believing because I'm certain it is true, it is the only way truth can be. To be narrow-minded, since I'm certain this is real, that must be the only way reality can be. That's what the delusion I'm looking at. So,
but doesn't that presume like that it's possible to have objective perception? And for me, I'm just wondering, is that really true? Is that really the case? Couldn't it be that my subjective experience is not actually objective? It's tinted by some distortion and how is that different for you? So how do you have this certainty that you're speaking of that is possible?
It is true that happens to students. That's why it's good to have a teacher, a guide, who could challenge you, who could question you. But however, the teacher will not believe you are really realized until they see you have your own certainty.
But also crazy people have
The certainty of truth is a different kind of certainty than the usual thing, people believing I am correct. Most people believe they are correct in what they think. In fact, most people think whatever I am thinking right now is the truth. That's normal. But spiritual realization, you have gone beyond that. You have let go of their mind. The realization is beyond mind. So thanks, Alessandro. That's a good point, and I'm illustrating it.
Hi, thank you. I've been thinking since the last meeting. I'm mainly Buddhist, but sort of fairly unaligned, I guess, brought up Catholic, about the reality of miracles, such as the appearances of the Virgin Mary within this teaching. Would you have any comment to make?
Not really.
No. Okay.
I don't have that experience, so I can't say anything about it.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
And those kind of things, they have nothing to do. I'm talking about realization.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, the experience of being awakened to reality of what you are, what the world is. No, that's different from miracles. Is a whole other topic that I'm not really addressing here.
That's fine. Thank you. The other thing I've been wondering is whether one could have a spiritual root or a set of belongingness to some spiritual beliefs that were based on doing harm rather than good. Or would the realm of the spirit not go there?
Well, it's possible if your spirituality is based on beliefs, not on direct experience.
Yeah, okay.
It's possible to believe things that might end up being in the way of your spirituality instead of enhancing it. And most spiritual teachings, in the mystical side, I'm talking about the mystical side, not religious kind. The mystical side of spirituality is you have to be free of your thoughts, of your beliefs, your ideas. You have to have experience to shine through directly.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Hamid, for wisdom.
Okay. Yeah.
I've read many of your books. My question is that my understanding still is that realization is still exceedingly rare, even among seekers. And for myself, I have many of the markers of what you might consider a more diffused self. And I'm curious for advice about what someone who has not had significant perspectival change, either to the non-dual or to a completely sort of vast awareness, whether there's a point to relaxing rather from seeking to living and staying in relationship and fostering a sacredness in every single present moment. Some people have called it fake it till you make it kind of thing. And that's kind of where I find myself.
To fake it.
That's my question.
You don't need to fake it till you make it. You can live as fully as you can, as honestly and sincerely as you can. So it's true, realization is rare. Any kind of realization is rare. And most traditions, they're lucky if they have few people realize that tradition. So realization is rare, although we are, our nature moves us. We have a deep movement or drive toward such freedom. But we don't always, get to it the way it appears as the full freedom that many teaching talk about. However, I think, one thing that I emphasize in my teaching has to do with the first kind of realization I talked about, the dualistic realization, that there can be realization in the ordinary world. I mean, we're living an ordinary life, ordinary world with cars and objects and birds and skies and mountains and people and all that. But there can be realization there, but not only, you can be spiritual experience there. You can have spiritual access of one kind or another, spiritual expansion, then spiritual illumination. Some experiences is a spiritual experience. So that is usually it's in a dualistic world, but I'm already said a dualistic world is one where reality can be, is not a wrong world. Like some teachings say it's an illusion, or some people say it's the world of lies. I said, no, it has lies, but it has truth. I mean, it has everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the beautiful, all of it, And we can be more or less spiritual in this world. The more we have access to a spiritual nature, and the more we have an influx of spirituality, the more we are illuminated, the more we have more wisdom, more inner peace, more good heart, more oriented mind. And that, for me, for most people, that's what they got, and they should just enjoy that. That is a valid way of living. You live according to where you are. You see, so if you have certain spiritual access, you have some spiritual experiences, let that teach you and let it guide you, and you work on just living that as much as you can. You can't do it perfectly, unless there is a realization, but you can do it, to your capacity. So that way, I feel that many people, like in our school, we have people have realization, but the majority don't. But they get a great deal of benefit of studying themselves, practicing, and being open to one kind of spiritual experience or another, one kind of presence or awareness or light or love or heart or clear mind. All of these are good. And the more we have, the better. But we shouldn't punish ourselves that we haven't gotten there. No, we need to learn to, in fact, the more we are okay with where we are, the more it will tend to expand, to open up. Instead of judging it as not it or not complete.
Yeah, that has been, recently more my experience, which is that, yes, I feel the loosening of the self, and I can watch the mind and awareness and everything arising within it and enjoy it. And, extreme fear or emotions, whether hedonically pleasant or unpleasant, come and go, and to just enjoy that space. But there's always that temptation to, it's a paradox. It's the longing that one has felt their whole life, and at the same time not letting it become a prison if you can't loosen the grip on that desire.
Well, you can feel the longing. Let it happen is one of the things that's happening. You don't need to not pay attention to it, but also just because you have longing, that doesn't mean you shouldn't live your life as fully as you can. I think it's more like the more spiritual experience we have, the more understanding, the more comprehension of what's possible, that there are things possible beyond the physical. Just learning that is a big deal for people. Many people, they don't know anything beyond the physical and emotional. To have some spiritual access is a big movement, a big part of the journey.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't look at it that we should either have a realization or enlightenment or nothing. No, that's not how it works, actually.
Yeah, that's actually my question, or my point is that if one feels like they've met a certain maturity point, to just sort of still practice, but let go of that that desire for a certain experience or a certain level of knowing.
Yeah.
And it's more likely to happen if you do that.
I agree with you. You don't want to try to achieve some experience that you have in your mind that you desire. And it can be longing to just be yourself as much as possible, or to be as real as possible. That's fine to feel that way, but you don't know what would that be. And let it happen that way. Not making it into an idea what it can be is better, because if you have an idea what you should experience, that can be an obstacle in the way.
Yeah. Like for me, and this will be my last comment, it's I experienced it as a very deep simplicity and clarity, but it's not like what's being described. It is to a point, but I'm wondering if I'm already sort of eased into a certain level of knowledge rather than understanding.
Simplicity and clarity is wonderful. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Hello, Hamid.
Hey, Sally. Yeah.
So I'm interested whether the experience of the realization differs depending on the teaching stream or the lineage or the path.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That depending on the lineage, you will get a different kind of realization, because lineages, posit a certain kind of realization, which means if you posit it, you're already asking a certain question.
I suppose some teaching paths have, for example, the absolute, but in another teaching path it might be, for example, called the goddess or related to some in a different way. So I was wondering whether that changes the experience of it or where the transmission's coming from.
Yes, it definitely is a big factor in changing the experience. I'm not going to say it's the only factor, but which tradition you follow, which teaching, which will tend to orient you towards certain kind of experiences. But we should not forget your own inherent truth, your own inherent consciousness also is the factor.
So it really is infinite then, the realizations, if there's
there are many
different types and different ways. Can you then, so in your own lifetime, you've had many different experiences of the absolute? That's what I say.
Yeah, I mean, the absolute, to realize the absolute is to recognize you are the absolute, not only experiences, it's as that is what you are for a while. For me, for several years.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's good question. It's illuminating for many people, I'm sure. But that's important part of what I'm saying is what teaching you have, which is what frame of mind, what view of reality you have, will also dispose you toward what kind of realization, which is because that makes you set up what quantum theory set up a certain experiment, ask certain question to find a certain result. See, which will bring up certain kind of answers, which is in this case experiences.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Okay.
Hey,
Hello,
hey, Franz.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I have a simple question. Maybe it's not so simple, but I know your distinction between direct and indirect experiences. And I always considered information to be more of an ordinary or indirect experience. But as you talked about, you brought up a whole different level.
Yeah, I mean, when I brought in information theory,
Yes.
it's most people, when they think of information, they think it's something you read or hear or something like that. You see, that's the usual, ordinary idea of information.
Right.
In scientific circles, when they talk about information theory, they don't just mean it things you hear or you read. They say, no, reality is made out of information. You see, what John Wheeler was saying. He said, information is basic, particles is secondary. That is a big deal. It's a big assumption. And of course, that's why some people said, well, I mean, you must have physical reality to even have information. And I brought in the spiritual perspective where it addresses both of them. Yes, there is a spiritual reality, the ground, whether it's awareness or love, and there is how the world appears there. And how the world appears in those realizations can be seen as some kind of information because it is a knowing, and the world appears as a knowingness within that vastness, that ground. In that sense, I take knowledge as information because information is a kind of knowledge. However, this knowledge is direct, immediate, not heard, not read, but experienced and perceived in the realization.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So quantum theory, when they talk about information, they don't really mean, what you read in the paper.
I get it now.
Yeah.
Thank you for making that distinction.
Good question. Yeah, because many people, when we hear information, say, well, second hand usually.
Yes.
When I'm talking about information here, it's first hand. It's actually zero hand.
Thank you.
Well, good. Yeah. I'm happy to be here with all of you to expand more on what I call the quantum view of spirituality. I'm basically elaborating more why I call the quantum view. Why, meaning there are many ways of experiencing depending on what question we ask or what tradition we follow. And the main point of it is I'm trying to bring in a sense of camaraderie, a sense of coexistence between traditions and spiritual teachings, so that traditions don't have to be ensconced in themselves, believe we got the truth and we know what it is, what the other knows. Might be too, but it's not as good as ours. We don't need to do that. We can say, I know a truth. This is for me, this is the truth. And I'm open to other people their truth being different. It's very difficult for the human mind to believe there can be two truths. They're both fundamental and real, but they're both real at the same time. And that is what I'm trying to put across. And hopefully I'm succeeding some. If I succeed some, it will be great. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be with you. Hope this is useful. We'll see you again in 3 weeks.